All right, what is up, everybody? We are super pumped to have you here as we talk about going from ad hoc questions to real-time answers, all the new awesome stuff we have baking here on the Mother Duck side. I have Garrett here with me. Garrett,
Howdy.
say hello. Yeah.
What's going on?
We are intending for this to be a really awesome interactive session. So use the chat. We will be moderating and observing, and we'll hop in there while Garrett guides us through the brave new world of dives. Garrett, take it away.
Sweet. I'm going to share my screen in just a second, but before I do, Dives is a new feature that we just launched into public preview last week. And really, we think about it as like a complement to the way that you get answers from data today. So everyone has like their, dashboards and BI tools, and those aren't going anywhere. But Dives gives you the ability to create pretty much anything you can think of in a composable asset that you can view and share with your team. And it's spawned some like cool creative ways to work with data. And so what I'm going to do is we're going to start by just taking a look at a few sample dives and what's possible. And then we're going to go all the way through the workflow of creating a dive with Claude Desktop and then iterating on it locally using Claude Code. And then if we have time, we're going to even take a look at a CI/CD workflow that we've been using here at MotherDuck to manage version control and automated deployments for our dives. So why don't we just take a look at what's possible just to start with, and then we'll start building some of these things. We're going to do all this live, so excuse any hiccups, but yeah, as Jacob said, jump in the chat with questions. We'll kind of answer things as we go throughout. We've got plenty of time to look at all these workflows together. I'm excited to see what you all think of. So I'm going to share my screen, and we're going to pop on over to a few dives that I have prepared, do the cooking show trick a little bit. So just like at the very simplest level, dives are just React and SQL. And that asset lives inside MotherDuck. And so you can create basically anything that you can think of that lives inside, a React and SQL component. This is just a super simple example that I made in about 30 seconds, taking a look at some of our classic NYC taxi data. It's an interactive data app style of asset in this, Tufty visualization style. And so this is super like basic and simple. I just want to take a look quickly at the code, right? Because this is just, again, it's just React and SQL. We have all of our component and styling here, and then our actual live SQL queries that are updated regularly on MotherDuck. You can also share dives, which is something that we've really dove into. You're going to hear a lot of those, sorry, here at MotherDuck using this share button. But, this is all fine and good. I think a much cooler one is something that Jacob created recently, actually, which, of course, will give me a gremlin on the demo. Cool. So this is like I'm not even going to do it justice, Jacob, but like a density chart for exploring game quality with a Datadog style of filtering. Big NBA head over here at MotherDuck, and you can do things like, filter on team, LA Lakers. And please, if I'm not doing your dive justice, Jacob.
No, this is great. I mean, one thing that I added that's just fun is that, because everything is one prompt away, there's autocomplete on all the keys. So if you type the letter like P and then hit tab, it'll just complete that to player, for example.
Oh, wow, that's nice. Yeah.
Yeah. So we, again, this is just stuff you got to add, right? Like, there you go. There's LeBron.
There you
go. Yeah, very cool. And so you can, you can toggle over there and see what the SQL is running behind the scenes is. Yeah, we like to have a little bit of fun with it. One thing that's really great is once you've observed, something that works in a product you like, you can prompt that and inject it straight into whatever you're working on, which is awesome.
Yeah. The big difference that I've seen in like my experience with using dives versus some of our kind of classic BI scaffolding is just how creative you can be, right? Like this example that you built is a really like fun, interactive way to look at this data. I want to try to find, just before we dive into creating one, I want to try to find your other example with your point guard stats, which I believe is in here. Here we go. Okay, so for our, and of course there's some rough edges here, but for our Microsoft SQL Server Management Studio enjoyers, we've also got NBA data sets in this very familiar interface. So if you really want to go retro, you totally can. All of this is just some errors and a SQL query.
Yeah, that's my fault. I don't have the database set up right in it.
Yeah, that's just fine. I just wanted to show the styling because
if you want to show something fun, you can right click on a table just for fun.
Let's see.
Oh yeah, we got to get those. Get those menu items in there.
Yeah.
Anyways,
I did make yesterday an example using Microsoft Access, and it even had Clippy. So there's a nice touch for the Microsoft enjoyers.
I did see that one. It looked amazing. Yeah. All right, I'll see if I can get that fixed while we
cool.
while we work on this.
Awesome. Cool. So point being that like you could create just about anything you can imagine using a dive, from kind of elegant Tufty style visuals. You can even make just like the most plain executive level dashboard ever, all the way to like this point guards data set, which of course now he's working on. So I think what I'm gonna do is switch on over to Claude on the desktop client, and we're gonna actually make one together all from within Claude. So let me go ahead and do that. Cool. Just checking. You can see my Claude window, right, Jacob?
Not yet. Now we can.
Yeah, sweet.
We do see your full screen, by the way. So there is a web browser behind it.
Yep, that's just fine. I'll just expand that thing.
Great.
I'm actually going to not use incognito, but what I am going to do is start a new chat with Claude. Dives start, everything that comes with dives kind of starts from the MotherDuck MCP server as the primitive. And so, at the most basic level, like the ability for an agent to create a dive on your behalf is a new tool in the MCP server. I've already got it hooked up here and connected to my DevRel account. And so what I'm going to do is just start by kind of exploring the data sets that are in my org. I'm just going to ask Claude, what data is available in my org? One thing I just want to note on Dives and the MotherDuck MCP as a whole is that we recommend using the Opus series of models. I'm using 4.6. We did a lot of our testing and development with 4.5. It's possible that Sonnet and other models will catch up in capability, but we've just found that Opus is the best at exploring data and using the tool sets that we've given it via the MCP server and for creating dives. So when you're thinking about tool chains here, think Claude. There are other clients, of course, that work as well, like ChatGPT, but Claude tends to be the best at exploring these data sets. Okay, so I've got a pretty simple org setup in MotherDuck in this account, and I'm just going to see, all my databases here, right? So I've got an empty MyDB, some sample data that comes with every MotherDuck account. You've probably seen this before, NYC Taxi, Hacker News, and so on. I just uploaded a new data set that is relevant to me. I'm a big skier, and we look at snowpack data in various Washington mountain regions pretty frequently. So that's actually what we're going to be using for the demo. And Claude also tells me, I have some shared databases that I haven't yet attached. So I'm just going to ask, what's in the Snowtel data? Do some analysis. So I'm being intentionally vague here just because I want to show a little bit of how Opus explores using the tools in the MCP. And once we have a better understanding of the schemas and the structure of the data, we're actually going to create a dive and show that workflow.
Nice. One thing I'll call out while you're talking about this, Garrett, is this does work in Cursor as well. Basically, anywhere you can drop an MCP, you can do this. Like as Garrett noted, we find that Opus is the most curious. So it does a lot of the analysis for you. So that being said, we are doing a little bit of work with Sonnet 4.6. Initial work with that has been promising, but we'll see where it goes.
Yeah. And before I actually look at the data, I just want to show exactly what the agent is doing here. So I gave it a very, very vague question. It's a really simple data set, and so there's not that much exploration to actually do, but it's using a couple tool calls. It's using this list columns tool to explore the tables. We're doing that again across multiple database tables. And then Claude starts to query to actually understand what is included in the database. So we can see a number of queries that are being run here, from super simple, just discovery type queries, to trying to get some summary statistics. And there's about 5 or 6 of them that are actually run before Opus starts to give me a better understanding of the data. So we've got 2 tables, super simple. This is really interesting because I didn't prompt for this at all, and Opus just kind of gives me a heads up, like, hey, here's how the current snow season is going up in Washington. We've got comparisons of SWE, which is snow water equivalent, not to get too environmental science nerdy out there, and a percentage of median. As you can tell, it's been a pretty tough year in 2026 for us here. I didn't need Claude to tell me that, but it certainly did. And it even gives me, like, this is what I'd call, real nerd stuff about why it matters. And so we'll skip that. But okay, so I've got this basic understanding using the MCP. And Claude prompts me to build a dive, actually. That's the last question I get from the agent. Want me to build a dive visualizing any of this, maybe a station map or the year-over-year trend? Seems like a great idea. I'm just going to say, yes, build a viz for trends. Of course, Claude is going to give me some difficulty because that is what it sometimes does. So I'm just going to start again. Okay. And these are just Claude desktop hangups, of course. So I've asked for a visualization, and Claude goes back to the MCP server to learn how to build that visualization. So if I can get it to actually, it would be perfect if Claude has an incident.
There is
Is there really?
a Claude desktop issue open right now, but I don't think it's necessarily this one. Anyways,
let's just see if refreshing can help.
I think it will. I think it will.
Yeah. Okay. As I was saying, and of course this will happen, Claude needs to understand how to actually build the visualization. If you don't give it any context, it could just do anything. And it's going to give you, without a guide, it just gives you kind of this standard, modern web React-y looking artifact. We've actually built what's called a dive, what we're calling a dive guide, into the MotherDuck MCP. And so Claude gets all of the context from that dive guide about how to actually build the visual artifact, right? So you can see just the markdown file that we've included as the dive guide, and it tells Claude how to behave with the user and also how to build that visualization. And so this is all of the context. This is similar to how you would maybe think of a skill or some other abstraction for agent instructions, but this is basically all the context that the agent needs to create a useful artifact for the user. We've also given it some example queries and syntax to kind of guide it with DuckDB SQL so that the queries are actually valid. And then once it retrieves that dive guide, you can see some other tool use coming into play. So it's got the dive guide, and it's going to start building out the queries that we need to get a sense for the trends in our snowpack. So we've got a simple query started here, and then a follow-up query that Claude is submitting and getting results. And now it's just kind of like parsing through those results and assembling the artifact. The build of the artifact can take a little while, and that's why we're going to show the Claude Code local development workflow here as a follow-up. But you can kind of see the React artifact streaming in, and of course we're getting some Claude trouble, and if we continue, then we'll just skip straight to local. But you can see the React artifact streaming in, and we should just be a minute or two away from a useful visualization in the Claude client. So let's see if it actually continues, and if it doesn't, then we'll skip straight to the local development workflow. Claude Code seems to be a little bit better at handling all of this context, but I think this is purely an issue on the Claude side of house right now.
Yeah, it's typical, I think, sometimes. That's all right. One thing you'll notice here is it is building kind of all of this React by hand. Part of what we're going to be thinking about, with this product is what does it look like to have better canned components available for users. Hey, look at this.
Let's see what we got. Okay, very cool. So it looks like it just got hung up in some of the token output there. But we did actually create this artifact, right? So similar to kind of the, oh, this is very funny. Similar to some of the examples that we showed. It's interactive, right? We've got some useful statistics about percentage of median. Like it just gives me the executive overview up front. This is the worst snowpack mid-February over the last 6 years. That makes me really sad, but that is the reality. And we've got a handy chart to compare previous years. As you saw, I didn't really give it any direction on what matters here. This is all just kind of Claude forming an intuition about the data by getting in the dive guide, looking at the queries to build out this React artifact. This is just static data, right? Like we've got all of our React components, and the data is just encoded as a variable because it retrieved that query. It processed that query, retrieved the data, and then it rendered the artifact. And so we've got kind of this headline that we built into the dive guide to just highlight that this is a preview, and you'd want to save this dive in MotherDuck to view it with live data. Otherwise, you kind of have to go through this process every time of refreshing, and it's not very shareable. And so that's exactly what we're going to do next. This looks good to me, and I'm going to go ahead and ask Claude to save to MotherDuck. Cool. So now we get another tool call, which is save the dive via the MotherDuck MCP server. So what's going to happen is Claude is going to take the guidance from the MCP and replace all of this static data with valid SQL queries against our MotherDuck database. This one also takes a little while to process just because it rewrites that entire React component with the actual SQL backing it. So we should get the same exact experience in MotherDuck. And then if we don't like how that rendered or we want to make some changes, that's where we'll break out the local development workflow. Okay, so let's see if we manage to get a valid dive. I'm just going to click on this link, which should take us into the MotherDuck UI. A little bit of loading. And now we have basically the same exact visual experience, the same app content, but built into MotherDuck directly on top of a few queries. So again, we've got this interactivity that's useful. Just some nice mouse over and tooltip affordances, the ability to filter and see quickly how other water years compare. But most importantly, we've edited, or the agent has edited, that same React code to replace it with SQL. And so now this is a live dive in my organization. I can share it simply just by using this share button or up here on the right. Every time I come back to this dive, the query is run again, or we can reload if data was streaming in from a weather service, for example. And so this is actually much more useful to me than just that static Claude type of artifact.
Garrett, here's a question.
Yeah, go for it.
I'm going to pause you for a second. So you could basically set up a snow report that basically updated every morning on something like this, right? So you'd be like, here's what mountains look the best, for this weekend or something.
Yeah, exactly. I didn't. Yeah, this data set actually comes from a USGS API that refreshes every hour. I didn't stream it in here to our database, but I can set up a simple pipeline that just streams it in, and this would always, would stay live because it's using the same SQL queries, right? So yeah, absolutely. Cool. Anything else that we want to hit before we just flip over to kind of this local dev workflow? I really love the local version of this.
I think I think it's ready to hit into local. Only thing I would say is that like sometimes the dives or Claude in general forgets it's using React. So like one of my favorite like little prompts is be like, remember you have React. You can make all this stuff interactive. You can add tabs, like treat it like a single page app. So you can build really deep experiences, but sometimes you have to point it there. It may not do that automatically.
Yeah, this is like a really simple dashboard, right? It's totally 101 compared to your NBA Game Quality Explorer Datadog dupe.
Sure.
Yeah, but like as we always say, it's anything you can think about is kind of just a prompt away. These are non-deterministic systems working with these agents, right? So it takes a little back and forth, but we could build things like this that would have taken hours in another type of tool or framework.
Yeah. Before you hop over, I'm going to pull up a question just from an interactive standpoint here. Question from Victor. Can Claude read dives using the MCP, right? For example, use this dive to tell me this.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's just even take a look at that, right? Claude has this get dives tool or tool that we shared through the MCP. So I could say like, what dives do I have available? And we should get a pretty, of course, desktop gremlins. But yes, short answer is yes, right? Like Claude can read the code and the results in the same way that it's interacted with here through this get dives tool. The thing that we're not showing here that kind of backs all of this is a really clever SQL API. And so you can manage dives, create them, update them, delete them within SQL through the MotherDuck API. Cool.
Yeah, I think we're good. We're keep rolling.
Nice. Okay. Let's edit this thing because it's useful, but it's probably not as rich as I would like. So I've got this Claude Code session. I am hooked into a repo that we're going to explain here in a second because it has some really clever GitHub actions for deploying to production and doing version control. But the first thing that I'm going to do is just pull down this dive. So I kind of skipped this whole local dev workflow, right? I just built it in the Claude desktop app. You could do the same thing in web or in Cursor. But as we saw with Claude desktop and some of these other agent interfaces, like they're not always the most friendly to work with. They have bugs or little gremlins in them. And just overall, it's kind of a slower iteration pace. And so I prefer to do this locally using Claude Code. But first, I just want to point out that I have the MCP server hooked up to Claude Code here as well. So I'm just going to say, what dives are in my MotherDuck account. Of course.
This may actually be a 500 error coming from Claude.
Yeah.
Let's see what's going on.
Okay, so we're loading the tool. Yep.
Okay, looks like we are succeeding. There are two elevated error rates issues on Claude status right now. So
perfect. We'll muddle through.
Yeah. Too much open clawing, I think.
Yeah. Right. So this is my dive, and I just want to point out that you could see I've got several here. Like these are all shared dives that are owned by other people in my org that I can view. But under my ownership, Claude is correct. We've just got this one dive. And I'm just going to say, pull it down locally for development. And you notice that I'm doing, dangerously skip permissions in Claude. This is just for the demo. You should not do that, preferably, especially when working in a shared organization. But what's happening behind the scene if Claude if the Claude service stays up is that the agent is going to access that list of dives and take that React code and pull it down to a local setup.
I'm gonna pause you for a second
Yeah.
and just throw a question up here from LinkedIn. Do I need local MCP for Claude Code, or does the data source connection work?
You do not need a local MCP. This is just using the remote MCP.
Yeah. So can you just when you get a second, can you do /MCP? Because I think they've reworked this recently in Claude. So if you see this list that Garrett has here, this is now shared between your Claude desktop and Claude Code. We'll see that's new. They used to be different sets of MCPs. Yeah. They're now shared, for better or worse. So once you set it up in Claude Desktop or Claude Code, it's available in other modalities. So no, you don't need to use the local one to use Claude Code, which is awesome.
Yeah, it's a great question. So I'm going to try to muddle through some of these 500s and see if we can get a local version for development. Oof, that's tough. All right.
This is what we call the manual Ralph Wiggum, I think.
Yeah, that's right. I think I just keep asking, and we can. Aha! See, that's the exact heuristic for working through Anthropic outages is just manual Ralph Wiggum. Okay, cool. So we're writing to this metadata file about the dives themselves. In a moment, I'm just going to show like the actual scaffolding for the repo that makes this possible. But essentially, you can think of it as like a package skill that Claude gets from a README, essentially, that helps it stand up a local Vite development server. And so once it pulls down all of the React code from this dive itself, we should get a local development server that we can iterate on a lot more quickly. Okay, we're getting through a little bit. Got more 500s.
Just tell it to keep cooking.
Yeah, keep cooking. Exactly. Oof.
Come on.
Come on, I know. Yes. Oh no.
Oh man, this is great.
Yeah, this is a perfect example of like working with Claude Code sometimes. Okay, a couple things. Yes, I do want to spin up a local preview. A couple things that are happening here in my repo. Come on. There we go. I've already got my tokens set up, and so my environment variables are being used by the agent. Here we go. It's just copying the dive code into the preview. You can't see my fingers crossed for Claude here. Okay, so we've got a server process. That is very promising. Okay, great. So in this repo, I've told Claude that like every time we pull down a dive for local development to stand up this Vite server locally, create the files and register them with CI so that we can deploy from the local server and then run our preview, right? So let me go ahead and open the preview. And if everything worked, we should get the same, there we go. Same exact dive, right? Same styling, same data. It's still querying MotherDuck live using my token that I've registered in my environment. But it's on this, this local development server. Cool. Ideas for changes, right? Like maybe the styling isn't so great. Like make the styling exciting. So Claude's just going to cook. And I also think that there could be some additional useful data in here. And I'm just going to give Claude like the vaguest of directions. oh, this is interesting. So I'm not actually going to let Claude use Chrome for a moment. That's what it wanted to do, and it's just a little slow for this demo. But I'll just give it a little more specificity. Make the styling Tufty style. This is a classic like data meme in here at MotherDuck where we just make the styling Tufty. Don't use Chrome. Just do it. Come on, Claude.
Yeah, it's interesting that its instinct is to go look at it when
Yeah.
it has the code, right? So I think you know, depending on what you're doing here, like I do find that as you get more mature with your dive and the interactions get harder for Claude to kind of visualize, it does absolutely help to use Chrome to look at it. But for the most part, you can just be like, you have the code, like don't open Chrome to do this. Like just
Yeah. And this is the thing about like how fast Claude Code is improving is that it gets new tooling and new like confidence about how to use that tooling just about every day. And so you get experiences like this where, you know, if you're auto updating your client, it can suddenly just start to think about Chrome as like the P0 for doing web dev, which means that you get some workflows like this that weren't necessarily what it was doing yesterday. So you can either pin your Claude Code version or just kind of like ride the wave of some of these capabilities, which is what we're doing. So let's see, we're going to get, okay, so it seems like we're good to go with the API for now. We're getting some new styling and Claude is cooking. Sometimes it takes a little while to think through some of these things, just depending on the actual prompt itself.
look at that.
Look at that. We've got a change. So Tufty style, right? Like very minimalist, very very elegant, kind of like that New York taxi demo I showed earlier. I actually don't like how it's constrained the max width here. I'm not sure why it's done that. Don't constrain the max width. I'm also going to ask, as it's working on that, like what other data can we add? Oh, come on. So we got through before the 500. We're now like full viewport. What other data can we add to this? Oh. So now we're actually going back to the MCP. This is the same workflow that I showed in Claude Desktop, right? Where it's listing columns, listing tables, doing some exploratory queries. You know, it's running in a few errors that might be API related. Yeah, there's another 500. But we should be able to muddle through some of these MCP tool calls to query that data set and think about what else to add. I'm not being super creative here. I'm just letting the agent kind of dictate where we go. Obviously, if I had a specific analysis in mind, I would guide it with some more direction. Okay, cool. So here we've got a few ideas that the agent shared about visualization, station level maps. Okay, temperature overlays. That's interesting. Make a pivot table for temperature overlays. I'm actually not entirely sure if this is a valid thing to do here with this data. I've pretty minimally explored it, but let's see where the agent goes.
Yeah, this is the fun part, right?
Yeah. This is the fun part because, you know, everything's one prompt away, and so you could do it super fast. And like that's what I love so much about this local workflow is that it's fast enough to do iterative analysis. And if you don't like it, I just tell Claude to roll it back. All right.
That's right. While we wait for this, I think to go, one thing I'll just call out is, so when you're doing this exploration, I like to just tell it to like explore the different facets of the data, and that seems to give it a nice jumping off prompt. Claude is in Opus in particular is very curious, so it does a pretty good job. But if you're using like ChatGPT or another model that maybe needs a little bit more prompting, faceting is a great way to kind of trigger it to do more work.
Yeah. There's so much just happening and trying to understand like the texture of the models and how they interact that just comes from working with them over time. Okay, this is actually really useful, right? Like we have And
it's not a pivot table though.
No, it's not, but it is useful. A density table, more maybe I'd call this.
Yeah, absolutely.
But you can kind of start to see, like, what years have been warm snowpack years. Like, 26 has been so terrible. Maybe you can also almost get the sense that there's been recent warming, potentially, as people say. And this is like just another useful bit of the React code that I want to keep around. Cool. So the Vite server that we've got going just hot reloads, and so this is super fast, right? And the next thing that I'm going to do actually is just show the deployment workflow. Anything else that we want to change about this from the audience or from you, Jacob?
I think, one thing that I kind of like to do is, do you have snowpack accumulations by water year going back further than 2023 or 2022? Like you have going back to 89, right?
Yeah, we've got going back to 89.
I would just be like, add everything to that first chart, like, and progressively make the lines lighter the further away, the older it is.
Cool. Add all available water years to snowpack. Let's just start with the available water years and see what type of like visualization density we get out of having, what was it? Almost 40 years worth of data.
Yeah.
Let's see if that's manageable, and then maybe we can filter down by decade, right?
I think like one thing that it did here potentially is because it was locally previewing this first, it was like, well, I can't get all 40 years of data, and so just like took a sample and then because it's just SQL to modify this to add more, it should be fairly trivial. Just add more lines to it.
Right? But it's also it's also like a very reasonable thing.
Oh yeah. I mean, I think this is actually a great, like the visual works really well on a 5-year trailing, but like, when I'm thinking about these trends over time, and I have a ton of years, I love to just do it this way. It looks like actually it's refactoring the way this chart works too. So you might lose your little mouse over on the right.
That's totally fine. I mean, once we get 40 years, it'll be pretty unusable. So I'm curious what Claude wants to do instead, right?
We'll see. We'll see how smart it is.
Yeah. Okay, so we're refactoring the queries. So we should be almost complete. Yeah, perfect. Updating the labels and the rendering. Good.
Yeah. I guess like one thing that I'll call out, like especially if you're doing this as like your job, like you can run many Claudes at once, doing many separate instances, right? This whole thing is sandboxable. So if you want to do a bunch at once, you totally can. That's a great way to spend a lot of tokens, but also solve a lot of problems at once, just because there is a lot of downtime. As we move between these things.
The workflow that I've been doing is really heavily relying on sub-agents as well. And so just kind of making Claude, or asking Claude to give a plan for kind of scaffolding the entire analysis, or making a series of changes that I want, and then having it execute with sub-agents. There's a whole lot of like new features in Claude Code to like work trees, for example, to enable kind of that single plan and like many agents executing workflow. And so definitely play around with that and just try to explore. Okay, so we've got like this is a super useful thing as well. I would maybe change the opacity on some of these previous water years to make it more obvious. But the agent knows that I care mostly about most recent water years, which makes a ton of sense. And it just added all of these previous years as kind of background context. We could keep iterating on this and just say, hey, add filtering, add group by decade, things like that. But this is close enough that I think we should go and push it up.
I agree.
Sweet. Okay, so before we do that, I just want to show you the actual workflow that we're going to use to get this into a repo for version control and push it up into MotherDuck. Internally, we've been calling this the blessed dives workflow, where like, and this is just a super simple FigJam diagram kind of detailing the work. We've got this deploy dive that we already built. We pulled it down to our local directory. I'm editing with Claude Code. Claude uses this get dive guide tool to actually create the React that's going to be compatible with deployment to MotherDuck. We don't support every single JavaScript library, obviously, from a security perspective. And once we're happy, we're going to push up a PR on a new branch, and the GitHub action that we have in the repo is going to deploy that dive as a preview attached to the branch so that we can preview it. Once we're happy, maybe we iterate on it a little bit more in the preview state. We're going to merge it to main, which then updates that original production dive ID. And then lastly, we've got one more GitHub action that once we delete the development branch, will clean up the preview so everything stays nice and tidy. All right, so back to my local preview. I'm just going to tell Claude, put this on a new feature branch and put up a PR. And I've still got permissions bypassed, so it's just going to keep cooking for me and put a PR on my repo. You can see we've got our new branch going, adding the commits, and yep, there's the PR.
Garrett, do you mind popping into GitHub and just showing the GitHub action also?
Yeah, absolutely.
It should be.
I'm going to show this PR and go. Yeah, okay. So we've already got the GitHub action kind of starting to deploy.
That was from earlier, right? Okay, so
yeah, this is from an hour earlier. So we should get a new one here in a moment. I'm going to start on the PR.
Oh yeah, perfect. There it is. Yeah.
Cool. So now I've got my PR, and Claude just gave me the link anyways. So this is all Claude generated, right? Like we've all seen our Claude Code PRs by now. The most useful thing though for us is this GitHub action, right? So that branching or that workflow that I just explored in Figma, what we should get here is, yeah, there we go. A preview of that dive we've just created. And so the way that it works today is the repo is set up, or the action is set up just to name it based on the feature branch, right? So here's my feature branch that Claude created, specifies that it's a preview. And if everything is valid, which I'm going to actually open that in a new tab. And if all of our React is valid, we should get a live version, that same live version inside MotherDuck. And there it is.
Right? Sweet.
Very cool. Sometimes Claude wants to include random React snippets that aren't valid, and so you might get an error because it doesn't pass muster with what's allowed in MotherDuck in the dives feature. In that case, I just copy the error and I go back to Claude and tell it to fix it, and it pretty much always does. So this is that same dive, right, that we viewed on local preview. Now it is on this preview branch that is deployed as a preview. Okay, so we could keep adding commits to this PR, and it actually the GitHub action will rerun. So all of the changes that we make will get previewed again using the same preview dive. But once we're happy with that, let's go ahead and merge it. So I'm just going to do this in GitHub, in the GitHub UI. I'm going to merge my PR. And when it merges, that action will promote the code from our preview dive into the production version. So this was just, this dive we're looking at here is kind of just that preview branch. And the GitHub action will make an API call to MotherDuck using that SQL API that just says update dive. And we should get that same, let's see here. Oh, I may have to actually close the delete the branch. Cool. So I'm just going to delete the branch, which I'm doing manually. You could add this to the action, but it will clean up the old preview as soon as these run. And I'm just going to track where that's happening here. Cool. So this is our merge. Action runs successfully. And we should have a second separate action for, for deleting the preview. So now the preview is gone.
Sweet. I bet it didn't put the link to the new one on your, it's not on your sidebar yet, right? Because it's owned by the Blessed Dives account.
Yep.
There you go. Oh, no, that's not it. Go to, I think you need to sort these on like updated maybe.
Yeah. Cool.
There you go.
Yeah. One thing that I just did, which is why it's a separate dive here, is I've got our a MotherDuck service account, right? That's actually the owner of the dives that we create in that repo, and that's so everyone can contribute to it. Because I created that dive with my own token as the owner, it shows up separately. But just creating them with the service account token enables this kind of like version control Git-based workflow for dives. So it's the same thing, right? And had I done it right with the service account to begin with, it would just update. But we've got this exact dive now live in MotherDuck. I'm just going to delete this old one because I don't need it anymore. And so we could take that same workflow, right? Like Jacob, you could grab this exact dive from the account, pull it down locally, and like make your own version, right? And put up a PR, and then would just deploy on that GitHub action. Cool. Any other questions or stuff? Anything from the chat that we should make sure to cover?
I don't think I see anything in the chat at the moment, but obviously feel free to drop commentary into chats. We can see everything on LinkedIn, YouTube, and StreamYard here, so drop it in. We'll see it. One thing that I'll call out, Garrett, is I think we may have learned something today, which is I think it's Vite like feet, not Vite.
Oh, is it really?
I don't know. That's what it says in the chat here. I just asked.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm not a front end guy. I'm like,
I know.
What is this? Yeah. Anyways,
that's okay. I feel better about when I hear people say Parquet files.
Yeah, sure. yeah. All right, we do got a couple of questions coming in, so I'm going to throw a couple up here for you, Garrett.
Yeah, cool. I'm going to stop sharing just for now, and I can pop the thing back up.
This is probably a question for me.
Yeah, that's a good one.
For first question, is there a list of UI components or libraries that a dive can use? Yes. Right now, it's recharts and D3. I expect that list to increase over time. The next step here is probably us adding a MotherDuck component library that has some very specific affordances, but TBD on that. You can get pretty flexible, or because you can do vanilla JS as well. So anything you can do in JavaScript will work. So I think I'm not really using D3, for example, in that NBA dive that had the heat map. I think that might just be like pure JS. So you have a lot of flexibility. Obviously, the trade-off is like, how many tokens you're consuming. Next question here from Sahil. Does the MCP use table comments? Yes, it does. The MCP does use table comments. In the list tables and list columns functions, it returns the table or the like description of the object, or like the name of the object, the type, right? So like varchar versus string types versus whatever. And it also returns the comment along with that. Great question. So yes, comments are 100% in there, and they do indeed improve the ability for AI to use your data. from a LinkedIn user. I see you, Troy, over there on the other side, but it shows like this in our in StreamYard. Any dives featuring geography and mapping yet? Great question. Not yet. You can do it by giving an SVG of the map that you want to the MCP. I think that the complexity of getting the spatial mapping correct is going to require probably another set of libraries than what we have. So yeah, really good question. I think that is something we'll consider, but I think it's just a matter of prioritization versus other stuff.
Yeah.
Great question here. Do these dives work with live data, or does it bake data like the observable framework? Garrett, you want to take this one?
It's live. Simply, like the dive code that we looked at earlier is just React and live SQL queries on MotherDuck, right? So there's a button to force reload in the session, but every time you come back to a dive, it'll run that query and execute. So it's very much live.
Yeah, I mean, I think like one of the advantages we have with MotherDuck is we have a really fast analytical database, under the curtains, right? So there's not the same need to cache it because the database and the viz are right next to each other, right? There's no network latency there. All of those things just happen, in the same entity or I guess node. Okay, great question here. Is the dive a single TSX/JSX file or intended to be a single file versus bundling? Great question. At the moment, it is a single JSX file. I think on the edges, I think it depends on how hard you're trying to push some of this stuff. You can get pretty far with a single file, but obviously if you're trying to build a full-on data app, I guess like not even data app, just full application, I think that might be where you'd run into some of those edges. Definitely intended to be single file for now, but we'll see where it goes. I think that so far what we've seen is you can express very complex visualizations, and frankly 1,000 lines of React is a ton of code, and you can jam a ton of stuff in there.
Yeah.
All right, let's take next one here. From Vinay. Can Claude look at my query text, propose simplifications, rewrite based on stats available in the underlying data? Great question. Yes, but also the way that it does that is not like a specific tool. You could just tell it to do it. Like, hey, look at this code, based on what you know about DuckDB and MotherDuck, look at this query and rewrite it.
Yeah.
Would be what you would do there. It would not be hey, run the query optimizer on this. That's not available yet. Yeah, but great question. Can dives write to MotherDuck?
That's a good one.
Go ahead, Garrett.
No, dude.
Okay. So today they cannot. Very soon, I think that will be different. We are working on how to land a write endpoint into the MCP in a way that is cohesive and makes sense. We are testing it in staging at the moment. TBD on when that launches. I don't think I'm spoiling anything here, but that's a very obvious thing to be adding, right? You could definitely potentially add some potential pieces there. One thing that's interesting is that we initially launched it kind of this way without that feature because we were working on landing a few snapshot rollback features in SQL. So those have landed. You can now undrop a database in MotherDuck, for example. We wanted to make sure that if we are going to give people the power to, delete their database from a dive, for example, that you also have the ability to undrop it and, change some of that stuff yourself, right? Because that is definitely way more powerful, but also, the risk increases there. So we need to make sure that there's a good way to do this. So yeah. Definitely adding that, which is going to be awesome. All right, and this is more of a comment than a question, but I'm going to pull it up anyway as a follow-up to the single TSX JSX file. Would it be cool to get a high-level markdown export snapshot of a dive You can do that already. I guess like this is an interesting question, right? Because I think it gets a little bit at the. I think there was a question earlier from Victor about this too, which is like, can you give it a dive and say like, tell me about like what's in it? I think there's two parts of that, right? Like obviously it has visibility to the the React components and everything. The second part is because it's just SQL queries, the actual answer to that is it doesn't quite exactly use the dive to answer the question, but it uses those SQL queries as a starting point.
Yeah.
Right. So it's not 100%, like, oh, like ask a question to a dive as like an on the Rails workflow. Right. Although absolutely, I think that could be built either by users or potentially by us. That would not be hard to do, like constrain an ask to a specific set of tables or queries. But yeah, I don't know, Garrett, if you want to add anything there.
No, I just think that the work, like the Claude Code workflow I was showing, even on local, when it's still constructing the queries, right? Like it's not static data like you have in the Claude desktop. It's still constructing the queries and using the API key to pull in the query results. And so you could just tell Claude, like, use this query to explore and give me more context on snow water year in 1989, right? Like that workflow of using the pre-existing query that it's built in the dive is very much within reach. It's just like, yeah, one prompt away, as they say.
Absolutely. And just to show like kind of the breadth that you can take this, I'm going to show one special nugget for those of you who stayed all the way to the end.
Yeah.
I'm not going to zoom in too far because this is our prod account.
all the really crazy ones are in.
But I just want to show. Let's see. This is one that I'm working on. Let me see if I can throw this up here. Share my screen.
Wait, I have one more question that nobody asked, but I think is very obvious.
Okay, go ahead.
Can you embed dives in a customer-facing application?
Good question. Do you want to answer it?
I know, answer my own question. Potentially soon. Yeah, I think it's fair. I think it's fair to say potentially soon. Like it's something that a lot of folks are asking about. And it feels within reach. So watch this space, as I say.
All right, I'm going to share my screen quickly for those of you as a little nugget, as a treat for those of you who stayed to the very end. I appreciate all of you. This is something I'm working on. This is takes the DBT manifest and puts the lineage into a dive. For those of you who are building things, building analytics and reporting on top of your database, you understand why this is important. All the interactions you want are here. I'm not going to show it. I'll just flash it quickly. This is our internal one. But all the things you would want. You can zoom in, zoom out, filter. I can actually. Well, I'll show this. This is pretty cool. I did a column filter, so you can do like I think it's HS org ID. So here you can see all of the models that use this HubSpot org ID, for example. All of these things are very much in reach for what you're trying to do here. If you can think about how to prompt it. So I'm just calling this out because it's not just like, hey, I can do charts and I can do I can do line charts and bar charts, and it's like actually you can literally anything that you can visualize like on a 2D plane, maybe even a 3D plane. I have not tried 3JS yet. I don't think it's supported. But you can get into MotherDuck, and so the possibilities are limitless, and we're super excited to share this with you all. Gary, you want to take us home and close it?
Yeah, I mean, last thing I'd say, just if you would love to hear feedback from folks, please join the Slack community and share your thoughts, what you're building. It's really cool just to see like the breadth of what you can create with dives, and so. Just thanks everyone for joining, and can't wait to see what you build.
All right, thanks everybody. We're gonna wrap up. Gerald, you want to end us?